Hey everyone, after more than 15 years in the business, I finally got a book published. If you want to do me the biggest favor in the whole world, please head over to mikeyop.com and buy a copy. That's MIKEYOPP.com, and the book is named Martyr, and it's about psychics and the history and future of the universe. I wrote it, and I think you'll love it.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, I'd love to welcome Callie Russell to the show. She's an ancestral skills instructor, wilderness experience guide, and also goat herder who lives nomadically throughout the American Mountain West. She's passionate about learning skills that allow her to live directly from the land and helping others to feel at home in nature through Capricorn's wilderness courses. Callie is also known from her performance on the History Channel's Alone show, where she survived alone and unassisted in the Canadian Arctic for 89 days. You did not mishear that. She survived alone and unassisted in the Canadian Arctic for 89 days, and actually during winter. So, Callie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
We are so flattered and honored that you would come on the show. As I mentioned when we were before we started recording, my brother is a huge fan. When COVID hit, he and his two daughters and his wife, so actually all four of them are huge fans, they came out to visit us here in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and we all quarantined, and they just started watching this random show called Alone, and they would just talk obsessively about it week after week after week. And I am not a reality TV show person because I love comedies, but even I was more than intrigued. So when he booked you, I had the best homework assignment ever, which is I got to watch season 7 of Alone, and I got to kind of meet you through the show.
Oh, awesome. That's fun to hear the origin stories of how we got connected.
Yeah. So it was super surprising because he books people months ahead, and then I start looking 2 weeks in, and I'm like, okay, goat herder, cool, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait, Alone? Isn't that show you love? And he's like, yeah, dude. And then when I started watching it, I used to live in Portland, Oregon. I'd meet a lot of people from Montana, and y'all have the same kind of cool streak. You guys are, my word for it is you're all badasses, but I don't know.
Well, yes, I'm in Montana. I'm based in Montana, and I have, long time family roots here, but I grew up in the urban sprawl of Phoenix,
wow.
Arizona. So I did not grow up with any wilderness skills at all.
Oh my gosh. Well, that segues perfectly into kind of my first question, which is, up until I watched the show, I always figured I could last a day or two in the wild. Now I think it's probably a day and a half. But I am curious for people like me who one of my favorite things I've ever done, it used to be a tradition in my life, is just to camp alone. I love being alone in nature. Do you want to direct people like me? What do you recommend for us?
I would say, as far as recommend for getting out there,
if you have that itch, what is a good step to scratch it? Because I have kids and a wife and a family, and so I can't really see myself just hey guys, gonna take off for a month later. But I do really miss being in nature, and especially alone. I know that sounds cliche, but there is something really special about that self-reliance.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. It feels so good to be alone in nature, and it doesn't even have to be deep wilderness to get the feeling of, I always just feel so much peace and calm, and all the things of the busy modern life sort of melt away when you're out there. And I feel like it's really good medicine for all of us. So I would just say, even if most people don't have a month or a week to spend, but any amount of time you have to spend, even if it's just an hour going on a walk, on a hike somewhere for an hour, or spending one night, I don't have that much, if you don't have that much time, just going for one night somewhere, even for me, spending one night out in nature completely changes my perspective on everything. And I think it's just good to just get out there, scratch that itch, follow that pole, no matter how much time, whether it's an hour or a night. It's totally worth it. It's always worth it.
Awesome. And yeah, I love hiking. So I did the Grand Canyon rim to rim, and I did tons of 14 to 15 mile hikes here. I'm curious. I know you said you grew up here and you've left, but do you have any favorite nature spot in Arizona in particular?
I have a lot of favorite nature spots in Arizona.
Cool.
I guess so many places. but there's a really special spot on Oak Creek that I really like. There's the biggest cottonwood tree I think I've ever seen. There's this big great grandmother tree there on Oak Creek, and that's a spot that I've been going to since I was a kid, and feel a lot of connection to that place.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so I guess kind of it's weird because I want to talk so much about nature, but I also want to make sure we actually hit the like goal of the show, which is to talk about your experiences with and your philosophy on death and dying. So I am curious, is like nature to you like a sense of spirituality? Is it a religion? Do you have a religion? Like where's the nexus between these kind of concepts?
Yeah, good question. Well, for me, I don't really have a particular religion that I follow. I do feel like I'm a spiritual person, but not with any specific things that I feel generally unattached.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's my just life philosophy, is to live my life fully and really experience what it is to be in a human body and living this life, and try to enjoy it as much as I can and spread joy to other people and help others where I can. And for me, I found my peace in nature, in the wilderness. For me, nature is not a big scary place that's going to kill you as fast as it can. It's my home. I really feel at home there. And it was something that I searched for a long time. I didn't really have that, growing up. And for me, I think I love your podcast. When Sam asked me to come on the show, I was like, I haven't listened to that podcast. I haven't heard about it, but I love the name. And I think that I will really like this podcast because my sort of life philosophy is that, I guess I have to tell a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, please
and
do.
So when I was,
absolutely,
when I was younger, when I was a kid, I have a big family, and I had two brothers, and they both died in separate accidents within the same year.
Wow.
And so I lost two siblings, and my, parents lost two kids, and it was a huge tragedy for our whole family. And I mean, the ripple effects of it are still affecting our family in many ways. And when I was younger, it was a pretty big loss, especially as a child. And I realized,
it's okay.
Excuse me, with for me, like being so close to death at an early age, I feel like has been a really big gift for me, because it's given me the courage to live my life.
Wow.
And I feel like I've lived my life much more fully up to this point than I would have if I wasn't close to death, if I didn't lose my brothers. Because I think, especially as a kid, you don't really have a sense of death and dying and that this life is going to end. You're just very present as a child, and you're like, this is my life. I'm going to live till I'm an old person like my grandparents. And for me to realize, see my brother, one was younger than me and one was older, see them, their lives were ended. It was gone. It was over for them. And they didn't get to keep living. They didn't get to become adults. So I knew that was the same for me. There was no guarantee that I would be able to become an adult. So I wanted to live my life as full as I could. And I remember too, this happened a little later when I was a teenager. I remember feeling I was struggling a lot with depression and anger. I had a lot of anger at the world, not only for, essentially taking, I kind of felt like a victim, like my brothers were taken from me, and so I was angry that I didn't have my brothers around. I was angry at the whole industrial food system and just everything, like our whole world. I was like, what are we doing to our planet? How are we treating these other species? And like, this is crazy. Like, for me, just to live and eat food and be alive, where I'm causing all these problems that are horrible. I felt a big sense of hopelessness and all these things that I think, is pretty common for people to experience these feelings. And I remember getting lost in that and having this sort of epiphany moment. And I realized that I could spend my life being angry, and upset and feeling like a victim, or I could say, hey, I'm actually alive. I'm not in the ground right now. I am alive and I get to live my life. And so instead of spending it feeling sorry for myself and feeling angry at the world, I'm going to live my life not just for me. I'm not going to just live an awesome life for myself. I'm going to live it for my brothers. So I have to live my life 3 times as good,
That's
3
awesome.
times as big, 3 times as fun. And so that's really guided my whole life trajectory and sort of philosophy, that I was I'm not just living for myself. I'm living for my brothers. So I can't waste this life on nonsense.
That's so cool. And I mean, gosh, you actually covered a lot of things I wanted to ask you about, but I want to dive deeper into them. I think I'll start with animals. So first of all, you mentioned like in a human body, and I always get made fun of by my friends because I always talk about being a human, and they're like, why don't you just say being a person? And I'm like, well, because like I feel like an animal that we just call a human, and then I see other animals, and so this has led to like a very conflicting situation in my life, which is that I basically pretty much I'm like a vegan at this point. But it's not like because I think you shouldn't eat animals. And so I get into these weird circular conversations with people where I'm like, no, no, no. It's what you described, Callie. Like the system in this country is like so demoralizing to me. It does make me angry. I have to deal with that. And so like I'm just trying to like chip back against that, but I don't feel like there's any momentum. I feel like it's sometimes just a giant waste. So I'm curious, like, because I can tell, like, you have the same ethical consideration of animals, but also, like, on watching the show and stuff, like, I would kill a porcupine. I would eat, like, whatever I could to survive. Like, absolutely. I don't think animals have, like, a special right not to be eaten by humans. So do you have any advice about that conflict I'm feeling?
Well, I know for me, I had when I was a teen and I learned about the industrial food system, I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to be a vegetarian.
Yeah.
and I did spend some years being vegan and almost a decade being a vegetarian, because I was like, gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this situation better, but I would like to be feeding it less, be a less, not a part of eating these animals that are living such horrible lives. So, and for the same reason, I think as humans, we eat meat. That's what
Yeah.
we've always done. I don't know of any old, traditional culture that doesn't eat meat. I mean, that's humans. Maybe there's one, but I just am unaware that that's who we are. We're hunters. Our eyes are in the front of our heads. We're hunters. That's what we do. We eat other animals. But the way we're doing it these days is pretty depressing. And so I just decided, well, I'll be a vegetarian until I learn to get my own meat, whether it's hunting or fishing or, raising farm animals. And I thought when I decided that I'd probably be a vegetarian my whole life, because I didn't know how I would get those skills. But, here I am a decade later or so with those skills. And I'm able to raise the food that I eat. And so I think for me, how I dealt with that was, choosing to get on the path of being more connected to my food. And I grow food, I grow plants for food. I have goats where I drink their goat milk, and, I'll eat the goats sometimes. I hunt. But my favorite thing is roadkill. I pick up a lot of roadkill and I eat it. I prefer to be a scavenger. Yeah, I like to be a scavenger. I'm a scavenger first and a hunter second, because I don't really like taking life either. It's very hard for me to take life.
Yeah.
But again, that's part of, to be alive, we need to eat something, and so I think it's for every person it's different. I mean, not everybody has the option to become a goat herder. Not everybody, there's not roadkill where everybody lives, so we all have to kind of like find our own path and what makes sense. But I think I think just looking at where there are little ways can I grow, some kale in a window box, in an apartment, and have these like fresh greens that I'm tending, and just making these little choices to be connected to food, to me feels very good. And I think that, for some people, maybe that's the path, is, raising their own food, or maybe just empowering farmers outside of their city to raise animals in a, an ethical way, and like supporting farmers, or, maybe, working in the food system and trying to improve it. I think there's so many different ways, and we all just have to find our own thing that feels good, like where we choose to, choose to put our energy and effort.
That's exactly like why I wanted to ask you, because I feel like there's so many venues and there's so many things to care about, obviously. And, I don't know you personally, but when this is the weird thing about culture. When you watch someone on like a TV show, you feel like you know them, because like I saw you cry, I saw you get excited, and so it's like I got a sense of your heart like through the medium of television, which is incredible. And then through that, I was like, oh, I can tell she deals with this same thing, which is like what you said, because I now want to ask a follow-up question, which is when one of your goats, like, first of all, do you name your goats? And then secondly, when they do like die, do you like talk about them and like have like a reverence for them and then eat them? Or do you try to like disassociate that side of like them being a pet and then also something you eat?
I do not disassociate. I name them. They're to me, I explain it. It's like you would have your pet dog, really. And I know people are like, well, I would never eat my dog. And I was like, well, yeah, I don't actually want to eat my goats either. They're my family, really.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with them. They all know their names. They come when I whistle, I'll whistle or call their name, and they come over just like a dog, so I put a lot of training into my animals. So they're not just a meat herd. You can raise animals like that. And I think about it would be easier on me if I had a meat herd that I maybe didn't interact with as much. But for me, I don't want to shy away from what it actually is. To be alive, for me to be alive, I need to eat something. It doesn't have to be an animal, but I was a vegetarian for 10 years, and I do feel a lot healthier now that I'm eating meat again. And I remember, like, I don't want to pretend that it's not a life. I don't want to pretend that it's easy or that it's not sad. To me, it is, but for some people it might not be, but for me, it is sad. And I don't want to shy away from that. And when I was out on alone, I was eating a lot of rabbits, and I was eating about a rabbit a day on average. And so I had to kill every day. I had to take a life every day. And for me out there, I was harvesting these rabbits, some with my bow and arrow and some mostly on my trap line. My trap line was sort of my bread and butter out there. And I had this realization that for me to have energy for one day, it took a life. It took one rabbit for me to have that energy to get firewood, to get water, to walk up the hill, to just be. And to realize that it takes a life for me to have energy for one day, that's sacred. That is a sacred thing. And I think by really honoring it and looking at it, looking it right in the eyes, not shying away and pretending it's something else, or trying to justify it, just be like, this is what it is. I'm taking a life. I'm killing an animal. They're giving up their life for me to have energy for one day. I'm going to appreciate that. That's going to make me want to live my day more fully. That's going to make me appreciate the energy that I have, and really honor the life that this animal is giving up. They don't have their life anymore, but I have my life, and I have this energy, and I want to utilize it and live fully. And so for me, really being honest about what it is, to me, gives me so much more appreciation for my life. So I don't try to shy away from the fact that I am taking life to live.
Oh, that's such a good answer. Thank you again. I mean, your answers are just so like you mix profoundness with relatableness, which is definitely key in this modern era of like sound bites and clips and short attention spans. So before we move into more questions about like nature and your relationship to all that, I would like to ask the pivotal question of the podcast, which is just simply, what do you think happens when you die? And then I'd like to know if that has ever changed in your life, or if it's been consistent since you were quote unquote introduced to death with your two brothers that year.
Great question. And I love that you ask people that on your podcast, because I feel like it's one of those taboo things, especially when you're having a semi-professional podcast here, to ask people that. I feel like I think it's a great thing to ask.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, for me, when I die, it gives so tying in from talking about animals and killing animals, and even not killing animals, harvesting potatoes from the ground, I'm still ripping up an entire plant to feed myself. So life feeds on life. There's no other way. That's how it is. All life is feeding off of other life, and I'm no different from any other living organism. I'm feeding off of other lives, and that's what I'm doing my whole life, is feeding off other lives, and I've taken many lives to live. So I find a lot of peace and contentment knowing that when I die, my body is going to feed some other lives. So I really hope, however, I mean, I guess I could burn up in flames or something like that. So who knows how I'll die, but I hope that I die in a way where my body is intact enough to feed other life, and whether it goes in the ground and is, decomposed by the bugs and the earthworms, and I come back and be grass and feed the deer and the goats and all the ungulates that have fed me for all my life. I really hope to feed them. Or if I'm left out and like let the birds eat me, I know that unless I burn up or I guess, no, even if I died in water, the fish would eat me. Like, that's what I like to think about.
Yeah.
Is who's going to eat me.
That's cool.
Because I've eaten so many animals.
Yeah.
And that is what will happen. Like, my body will be food. Hopefully no one puts me in a box. That would be like the worst thing. That's what I don't want, is to be put in a box.
Yeah, that's like my biggest fear, is that everyone who loves me and knows me isn't there to make sure that that does not happen when I die. I don't want any embalming. I want to go directly in the ground. I want to give back the nourishment I've received. I guess it's the same kind of question, but on the subject of death. In addition to just like your 89 days, not just, but your incredible 89 days in the Canadian Arctic, you've also, before and after, spent a lot of time in other wilderness scenarios. I'm just curious, in your entire life so far, what was the closest you ever came to thinking you were going to die in one of those excursions?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've had some pretty close encounters with death, and I don't think that this one isn't. I don't think I was actually the closest to death, but this is the one that just popped into my head when you asked the question. And there was this one time where I was sleeping and I woke up and there were 3 mountain lions, a mom and 2 babies, right next to me.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't think they were actually thinking to eat me, but in the moment, my nervous system definitely thought that I was about to get eaten.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think about or picture like how long it would take like rescue attempts to find your dead, decaying body on one of these? Like, does that ever like occur to you? Not in like a bad way. I'm just curious if that ever like flits into your mind.
Of course. Yeah. And I don't worry about it. I don't let it stop me or hold me back,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm kind of always aware of that, because especially on solo adventures, if I get all the time, I'm like, okay, well, if I broke my ankle right now, I'm how close am I to the nearest road? 20 miles to the nearest dirt road. And then how long will it be until somebody drives on that dirt road? I'm always thinking about how far out I am. And I think it's good to think about the logistics of that too. And no, it's a big risk when you go out alone. If you get hurt or even get sick too. I've gotten really sick.
Oh, wow.
And been so weak. I'm like, well, I can't hike out. I'm too weak to hike out. I just have to survive this sickness until I, stop barfing and get better. But I'm just out here until I have the strength to hike myself out, because there's no other way I'm getting out.
Yeah, totally. That was my favorite part of season 7 when I watched it, was that my sense of competition is insane, to the point where like sometimes I worry. I'm like, oh, you probably should have stopped this like jog like a while ago. Like, you're just doing this to prove that you can break your own record, blah, blah, blah. So when I saw you not eat like the spotted liver and then like go ahead and end up eating it like 8 days later or whatever, I just kept thinking about how that like that vibe is what survivalists have. And it doesn't mean you're going to survive. Like, people just die. It like happens. But it was cool to see that like, I don't know. I always wonder what other people, actually, this is my question for you. I should have said this really quickly. what is like your mantra? What's like your go-to when like, because everyone like sort of wants to quit, but then you just like don't. So like, what do you tell yourself in those moments?
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
Well, that the discomfort will pass. That, you know, I'm uncomfortable now, but it's not going to last forever. And also, just in my life, there's going to be a continuation of uncomfortable things, and things will keep happening to me that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I'm alive, things are going to happen to me that I don't like, and they might be uncomfortable. And, you know, if I escape this time, I'll just be in another uncomfortable moment in the future. So I just have to just, you know, like take a moment and breathe and know that I'll might feel different the next tomorrow, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. I have a couple different things that I do, you know, when I when I kind of get to that wall, that hard place. And out there on Alone, I thought a lot about my ancestors.
Cool.
And I guess all of our ancestors, really. And I just would think, oh, this is a really hard day for me, but at any other moment in time, this is probably not even that hard.
That's
really.
So
and,
cool. Yeah.
And just thinking about everything our ancestors have dealt with, and the things that people, like humanity, has gotten through. I'm like, this is no big deal. And I can like press a button, you know, on the GPS thing, you know, and a rescue team will come out and save me. Like, nobody's had that in human history. Been in a you know, a horrible situation and, you know, have that way to get out. And so I was like, all right, my ancestors made it through, you know, all the horrible things they made it through. I can make it through this. I can make it through another day.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm sort of curious, like along the same lines, when you're on the show and you're like risking things and then you're not risking things and stuff, like how much were you surprised by like moments where you like knew you were performing for a camera, like because I'm more asking about the psychology of being alone for that long, because I'm such a hypocrite, because I'm like, oh, I love being alone, but no, I mean, not like for more than 4 or 5, 6 days. Like I start to get weird. I know, because I kept journals when I was alone in Europe once for like 2 weeks, and I like get weird. I just no idea. So what's that like?
Well, you get to know yourself really well. Which it sounds like you did too. You're like, I did get to know myself a little too well.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I felt like I was just going, I actually loved being alone out there. I loved it so much. And I hope I get an opportunity to drop in that deep again, because it was so profound. And because what I've found, I've done it, like you were mentioning, I've done a lot of wilderness trips, some solo trips. You know, before I went on the Alone show, I spent 30 days solo in the New Mexican wilderness, and I've done lots of trips. And it takes time for that, your mental chatter, because we're always thinking. We think so much all the time. And there's this mental chatter. You're always kind of like thinking about what happened, you know, the past, the future, the moment. You have all this like internal dialogue about everything all the time. And eventually it slows down, and then it stops, but it really takes time. And it's sort of like this mental purge that has to happen. And eventually, at least for me, I drop into this place of quiet mind where that mental chatter actually just quiet. It's amazing. And I start to drop into this place of how I think wild animals must feel, because I don't think they have the mental chatter that us humans experience. And it's really experiential, and it's like your mind quiets down and all your senses heighten. Your smell, vision, hearing, everything heightens. And the longer I was out there, the deeper I went with that feeling. And I loved that feeling of feeling very present and very much like a wild animal on the landscape, and very connected to everything, and noticing all my surroundings and just little details, just noticing where on my path to get water, that the spruce tips were nibbled just a little bit. I'm like, oh, an animal came by and nibbled these spruce tips, like, since I walked here yesterday, who was it? And then like start looking for tracks, and you just start picking up on all these things. And so I really enjoyed the being alone. But you have to kind of go through that an uncomfortable period, I think, to get to that place where you kind of like let go, and your mind, you kind of drop into this other experience. At least like that's what it's like for me.
No, that's so cool. So do you kind of have like a kindred spirit relationship to like quote unquote wackos who like live out in cabins and like just like shun humanity? Do you feel like after that experience on Alone, like 89 days, do you feel like a weird kinship with them or any sort of relation to that?
Well, I think I understand. I think I can relate to it. I can relate to people who choose that. And sometimes I think about choosing that for my life, but I also love people and love to spend time with people and, my family and friends and things too. So I probably won't become a full-time hermit. I'm like a part-time hermit.
Yeah. That's cool.
Part-time hermit.
That kind of was my other question for you was, you seem like a person who would just be a great mother and like family person. Is that a goal you want to achieve? Do you have like plans to start or have a family of your own, like with kids specifically?
Oh, well, I have 16 kids.
That's so funny. You're referring to goats, I'm assuming, or?
Yes, okay. Yes. I have 16 goats, and 6 of them are actually kids because baby goats are called kids. So I get to tell people that. Like,
my wife's making fun of me on behind the scenes. She's like, "You didn't get that."
But it is a good question, and I think with most things in life, I try to strike this balance of caring and not caring, which may be hard to understand, or so some people might be like, what are you talking about? The balance between caring and not caring. But it's a sense of unattachment, but not in a disassociated negative way, but it's just non-attachment to particular outcomes, because I don't know how things will turn out anyway, so no sense being attached to them. So I don't feel any attachment to having children, but I would like to have children. I would. And, I'm 35, and as a woman, 35, I think that's the time where biologically you start, your body is like, hey, if you're going to have kids, now's the time. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. Yeah. And I didn't want to ask to get too personal. It's just more that I wanted to make sure you knew that, like, and this segues into the next question. When Alana and I watched the show together, what we really, really noticed about you that we like loved, because we were like, what if we don't like her? Like, what if she's like a caustic person or, whatever, but you had such a positive attitude. And like, she and I, like, that's one of our biggest strengths and bonds is like, just keep a positive attitude. It doesn't matter. Like, if I was on a reality show, I have no idea if I would ever watch it or not. And I know that I don't always look at or watch all my stuff. It's kind of hard to explain. And it's not because I don't have an ego or I do. It's just, I get weirded out sometimes watching myself. So I was curious because I don't know if you actually watched like the entire like edited version of the show, which is obviously not what you experienced. But the way they edited it together, I noticed that you and the guy who won it, who lasted 100 days, and by the way, just for people listening, you can, I don't know, I don't want to like ruin the show, but Callie was essentially going to win. And it's sad how it ends for me, at least, because I'm a fan of yours. But I did still notice that you and the other guy who lasted all 100, you both had like a really warm, exuberant, like positive attitude.
Yes. Well, okay. So about watching the show, I do get it. And it is true. What happens out there is different than what they do show, because, I was out there for 3 months, 89 days is 3 months. So, and then I think what's cut down onto the show is probably an hour of airtime, like of, where I'm shown. So a lot happens. Yeah, there's the edited version, which is different. And I was thinking to not watch the show because I didn't want it to taint my experience, or like I would start to think that was the story and forget my story.
Oh, yeah.
But I did end up, yeah. But I did choose to watch it mostly. I didn't at first, but then, friends and family started texting and calling about different things. I was like, all right, I better see what they're showing so I know what people are seeing. And I did watch it. I've only watched it the one time when it aired. So I've never gone back and watched it again. Yeah, but I think it is important to keep your own experience alive and however you can for that. And I do know people that have been on the show that have chosen to not watch their season and they haven't watched it, which I think is a totally good, is a good choice too. So, and then the positive attitude piece of your question, I do think that mindset is very important, not just to wilderness living or a survival situation, but just to life. And with survival stuff or wilderness living, the skills are important. And I think for going on the show, it's good to have a baseline skill set, foundational skill set. But I think what's more important than the actual hard skills is mindset and where what your attitude is, what your mindset is. And I think that just comes down to everyday life too. It's the power of mindset is so strong. And that's something that I'm always working on, is to just have a, more, solid, open, peaceful mindset. Like how can I have that? And for me, it's spending time in nature. So luckily Alone was a great combination for me.
Yeah. That's cool. And it was really noticeable. You really did. It was like palpable enthusiasm and happiness. And I kept tracking as the numbers got colder and colder, because I used to live in Ithaca, New York. And I was like, I've been in colder. And then like one day it was like so much colder than anything I've even come close to. And I was like, well, with a wind chill, I once felt that like towards like the side of a lake in Pittsburgh. But it was just like funny trying to relate to you. And then, and now that I know that you grew up in the Phoenix and the Arizona, I'm dying to know, just like a really quick question. What would you prefer if you were going to be on like a third season of it? Extreme heat or extreme cold?
Heat.
Wow. Oh, good answer. That made me happy. I always tell people I've been in both, and I would just much prefer the extreme heat.
Yeah. You can die of thirst pretty quick though. So hopefully there's water somewhere, but yeah, it was, that on Alone, that was also the coldest weather I'd ever experienced as well. So for me, I had a lot of firsts out there, and a lot of, I got to push my edge in a lot of ways. It was awesome.
Let's say there's someone out there who actually is capable and they really are good at wilderness and stuff, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to try out for Alone. Like, I think I have a good chance of making it. What would you say is the one thing that someone's not going to see coming that really surprised you that was negative?
For my personal experience?
Yeah.
Well, I think the main thing is it's easy to start planning your experience out before you get there. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to build this type of shelter. I'm going to, it's going to be close to water. It's going to like have I'm going to do all these things. It's going to be like, I'm not going to be like real smart about this whole plan I have. You have like this plan of action, and then they drop you out there, and then the landscape they drop you in is completely different and has none of the resources that you thought you might have, and it has stuff that you didn't know you would have, and it's just completely different. And so I think that I think being able to remain really adaptable is important. And because for me, I know that happened. It's just a lot of my ideas, they go right out the window once you're landed in your spot. You can plan it out and have this like great plan, and then you're like, well, there's no big trees, so I guess I can't build a cabin, or there's no rock, so I can't build, whatever it is, so I think that is, for me, that was I was dropped in a north-facing bowl, which in the winter meant no sunshine. So and it was all cliffs. I was like, where am I even supposed to put a shelter? It's just cliffs everywhere, So the landscape, to me, I didn't think like choosing a shelter spot would be hard. I thought that would be the easiest part of it, because I know what to look for. And I was like, oh, well, there's like actually not a good shelter spot because it's all north facing. And so, north facing cliff, that's exactly what you want for a winter, right?
Yeah, that's cool. That's a great answer. And then my last really quick question about Alone, and then I'm going to give you the floor to give a peaceful or loving message or whatever you prefer to our audience. So my last specific question is just, was there ever a point where you were like, oh, I bet everyone else quit and I'm just going to have to sit here for another like 20, 30, 40, 50 days? Or did you have like a funny feeling that someone else or many people were still competing against you?
Well, I had a lot of confidence in the other participants. Everybody out there on that season, I feel like every season the participants get more and more skilled because the casting people get better at finding people that are like really legit. So I felt very confident in everybody. So I thought that everyone was going to be out there for a very long time. Like the competition was tough, if you will. But I knew other people were out there because I would have dreams of it. I knew Kai was still out there. I had a dream of her later, and I knew I would get feelings. I was like, I know Kai's out here, and I just get these feelings. So I never thought I was the last person, but every now and then when I was tired, I would be like, it'd be kind of cool if I was already the last person. But you know.
Yeah. And by the way, one more compliment just to throw at you, because I think as a father and as someone who's like watching our world go through like so many changes, I think it's really important for people to like accept things with like graciousness, and the way you accepted, I guess I'm just going to ruin the show for everyone, the frostbite and what happened with you was so helpful for people like me, because I constantly wonder like, when is enough? Like, what is it like to tell your family, you know, I'm done with this thing I used to do in my life, I'm going to move on to something else? Like, that is a really hard part of life, I think, for a lot of people, especially ambitious people. So I just want to let you know that was like, for me, actually the most rewarding part of the entire journey of watching you on the show was watching you like smile and cry at the same time, and like just deal with how complicated that was. As you know, because you listened to a couple episodes, we always end the show with just letting our guests give whatever message they want. It can be whatever you want. So,
well, thank you, Mike. Thanks for that too. I would just say to remember you're never alone. I think that in this life, we can get really caught up in feeling that we're alone in whatever way, even if we're not physically alone, but we can feel like the sense of loneliness, and that we're never alone, that we always have the other. For me, I feel very held by the ecosystem, you know, the plants, the animals, the rocks, all of these, the nature that's around us. And so just to remember you're never alone, not only as, you know, there's other people like going through whatever you might be going through, but the power of life is all around us all the time. And sometimes it's just about stopping. It's like slowing down long enough to just focus on your breath, like go for a walk, like look up at the clouds, like notice the sun, and maybe go sit under a tree. And that the healing is always available. The healing that nature provides is always available to us at any time. And so just that, you're never alone.
Oh man, that's so awesome. I love it. I'm just so thankful for you for making time for us. I'm so thankful that you do what you do. There will be links, everyone, because she has her own website and you can take courses and all that stuff, which is just like incredible. So please, please, please check out Callie Russell's stuff. And I also would totally endorse sitting down and watching season 7 of Alone. As someone who loves television, I was very surprised. I think that it's so cool to like meet you for real and then compare that to like the studio version they tried to present and all that. And to be honest, it matches up pretty well. So thank you again for everything you've done, and thank you for what you're doing. And everyone, please check out her stuff. And the best way to support our show is just to head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up for free for the weekly letter that also announces each podcast. And for everyone listening at home, my name is Mike Oppenheim. You've been listening to another episode of Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon. When I hear this song and I walk into you.